This podcast is supported by The Real Real. Want to know the deal with The Real Real?
I'm always shopping The Real Real. They drop over 10,000 new arrivals every day from the luxury brands I'm obsessed with, all up to 90% off retail. Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, Dior, Cartier, Tiffany. P.S. It's super easy to style on The Real Real. When I'm ready to part with my pieces, I can drop off or schedule a pickup, and they handle everything from photography to shipping. Everything. All I have to do is get paid and start shopping for my next favorite piece.
With over 38 million members and 40 million items sold, The Real Real is the world's largest and most trusted resource for authenticated luxury resale. No one else can say all that, because no one does resale like The Real Real. Thousands of new arrivals daily at 90% off retail. And right now, you can get $25 off your first purchase at therealreal.com. Go to therealreal.com to get your $25 off. That's therealreal.com.
Jody Loomis, Jessica Baggin, Kelly Ann Prosser, Michelle Martinko, Christy Mirak, Carolyn Rose. Do these names mean anything to you? All these people are murder victims whose cases were cold for decades, until recently. They were solved by investigative genetic genealogy. This new crime-solving tool is rapidly providing us with the names of elusive killers. But each one of these cases is unique and worth exploring. Each episode of the DNA ID podcast will focus on one newly solved case and look at the story behind the headline. Who was the victim? Who was their killer? And why did this tragic crime occur? It's brought to you by AbJack Entertainment, hosted and produced by me, Jessica Betancourt, and co-produced by Mike Morford. Make sure you subscribe to DNA ID today, wherever you listen to podcasts, so you don't miss a single episode.
You're listening to The Murder in My Family, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including Missing Persons, DNA ID, Scene of the Crime, Malice, and 3 Men and a Mystery. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for episode 77 of The Murder in My Family. I'm your host, Mike Morford. In this episode, we'll be discussing the case of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen, a young couple who were on the verge of being married, only to have their lives ripped away from them on a secluded California beach by an unknown gunman. We'll get into this case after some quick housekeeping. Independent podcasts like this one depend on word of mouth to bring in new listeners. So if you find that you enjoy this show, please take a minute to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast, and be sure to introduce a friend to the show and invite them to listen. With your help, The Murder in My Family can continue to grow and reach a new audience. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderMyFam, or by searching for the Murder in My Family podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to support the show through a Patreon donation, it's always appreciated, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com/themurdermyfamily. Benefits of supporting the show on Patreon include early access to ad-free episodes of the show, plus bonus content not heard in regular episodes. Support may also include thank you cards, stickers, and more. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/themurdermyfamily. In each episode, I'll give shout-outs to any new supporters. In this episode, I'd like to thank Lola Tassione, and thank you to all the supporters who generously donate to help keep the show growing and improving. One last note before we get started. Please consider supporting any of the sponsors that you hear on The Murder in My Family. the way that those sponsors support the show. It's with our sponsor support this show can go on and continue to provide a platform to share these stories with you in every episode. Thank you. And now on with the show. On August 14, 2004, the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department in Northern California received a call for help. There was a man stuck on a cliff, one of the many cliffs in that area near Jenner, California. They sent a helicopter up to assess the situation, and instead of anyone stuck or needing rescue, 2 sleeping bags were spotted among the driftwood, and inside, first responders found the lifeless bodies of 2 young people. Lindsay Cutshall, who was just 22 years old, and her fiancé, 26-year-old Jason Allen, had both been shot as they slept in their sleeping bags. They were still zipped into their sleeping bags, and there was no sign of a struggle. This was the beginning of a perplexing mystery that would take years to solve. At the center of it, the victims were 2 outstanding young people with their entire lives ahead of them. Lindsay Cutshall grew up in Fresno, Ohio, and Jason Allen was from Zeeland, Michigan, but the 2 met in West Virginia at a Bible college. Both Lindsay and Jason came from families of strong Christian faith and had each spent time giving to others through missionary work. The pair were a natural match and true soulmates, and they decided to get married. They were on the West Coast sightseeing and having fun before their married life together. They both worked at the same Christian summer camp as river guides. They decided to take a 3-day trip around the coast seeing tourist destinations like Fisherman's Wharf and the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It's also believed they visited the town of Sebastopol and Guerneville because their red Ford Tempo had been spotted there. Sebastopol and Guerneville are small but not tiny and have many historic and tourist attractions, such as trails, beaches, shops, and all kinds of events. It seems that they were having a nice, peaceful time together on the coast. They ended up sleeping on Fish Head Beach off Highway 1 in Jenner, California. This is an extremely small town in San Francisco's Bay Area. Jenner has a population of about 136 people. Police believe that Lindsay and Jason stopped and tried to find a room to stay in for the night, but there were no vacancies in this tiny town, so they camped out on the beach. This area is so small it's technically not a town. It's described as a hamlet, so it's not a surprise that there'd be so few opportunities for lodging for the night. Already having camping equipment and sleeping bags in their car, they must have decided that one night on the beach wouldn't be so bad, and they parked their car and set up their sleeping bags side by side on the beach. It seems like the ideal setting, surrounded by cliffs with crashing waves, the kind of place that's isolated. But unfortunately, they weren't alone that night on the beach. The killer was watching, stalking them, and when the time was right, he struck, shooting both of them in their sleeping bags. Investigators were baffled. This young Christian couple wasn't from the area, and didn't seem like the type that would make enemies. Their Ford Tempo was still parked where they had left it, and Lindsay still had all of her jewelry on. There was no sexual assault to either person, and no sign of a struggle. It looked like someone had walked up upon them while they were sleeping, either late Saturday night or very early Sunday morning, and shot them without doing or saying anything else. The fact that both were still zipped into their sleeping bags shows that there wasn't time for anyone to react or try to escape. The murder weapon proved to be a relatively rare .45 caliber Marlin Model 1894 hunting rifle. Police conducted door-to-door searches for the rifle in the small town. Apparently, it was rare enough that having one would make you a prime suspect. But no such gun was discovered, and the case quickly went cold. And police were left asking who would kill these 2 young tourists with an obscure weapon and why. Police began going in different directions, trying to find anyone that might have a reason to kill the young couple. One person they looked at was a man named Joseph Henry Burgess, and he had strong religious beliefs that young people shouldn't sleep together before they're married. In fact, he had attacked a couple previously with a similar MO. In 1972, he killed a young couple camping on a Vancouver Island beach in Canada. But soon afterwards, he vanished, and police didn't even know if he was still alive. But it turns out he was. Burgess died in July 2009 in a shootout with New Mexico sheriff's deputies. And police never had a chance to find out if he could have been the one that killed Lindsay and Jason. But there was nothing solid linking him to the case, other than him being responsible for a similar crime in 1972. Determined, investigators pressed on and started looking at other suspects, and one of them had been under their nose right from the very beginning. A local man with a history of violence. Meanwhile, while police kept an eye on him, Lindsay's and Jason's families dealt with their grief, wondering when they would get answers. For 13 years, their families waited and wondered. It seemed hopeless when out of nowhere in May 2017, a surprise press conference was called. Months earlier, in March, a 911 call in Forestville, California had led to the solving of Lindsay's and Jason's murders. A mother was on the phone, frantic. Her son, Sean Michael Gallen, had shot his younger brother Seamus and fled. When police arrived at the home, they found Seamus dead. He had been shot with a .223 caliber hunting rifle. It didn't take police long to find Sean Michael Gallen, and he was arrested at a gas station. He later agreed to talk to investigators about the murders of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. Police were very familiar with Gallen. He was well known to them because he was a self-described survivalist with a long rap sheet. He displayed erratic behavior and had shot a man with an arrow in Guerneville just short of 5 years before the murders of Lindsay and Jason. He was also suspected as being involved in a bombing. He had been sentenced to 3 years in prison for assault with a deadly weapon for the 2009 arrow shooting. This conviction made it illegal for Gallen to own any firearms or ammunition, yet he definitely used one to kill his brother. He was known in his community as a hermit with a troubled reputation, who was noted as having weird behavior and being an animal poacher. Police had received numerous tips over the years that Gallen might have been involved in the murders of Lindsay and Jason, but they just didn't have anything to tie him to the case. It turns out that local police found Gallen near Guerneville Beach a week after the Jenner murders wearing camouflage and carrying a loaded stolen gun. When they searched his home in August 2004, they didn't find a .45 caliber rifle. Years later, his father, David Gallen, would confess to hiding his son's guns, in effect, helping to protect his son from being charged with murders. David Gallen lied about throwing the guns in a pond known as Corbel Hole. It's unclear what actually became of the weapons, as David Gallen took his own life in 2013 via a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Sean Gallen mentioned his father confronting him with a flyer which had information about the rare murder weapon used in Lindsay and Jason's murders, and believes this information was a contributing factor to his father's suicide. When Sean Gallen finally confessed in 2017 to murdering Lindsay and Jason, he described carrying a flashlight down to the bluff and seeing the two asleep. He went back up to his car and got his rifle. He shot Jason first, and the loud noise woke Lindsay. She sat up, still in her sleeping bag. Gallen said she made a noise before he shot her. He collected the shell casings and thought about digging the bullets out of their bodies, but ultimately decided against it and then left. He told authorities where to find evidence that would link him to the murders. Off to the side of a Guerneville road, investigators discovered an old soda can with 7 rifle bullet casings and remnants of a California State Parks money envelope inside. Apparently, Gallen had been drinking that night as well. Gallen felt that the murders were the fault of his victims because they were camping on a beach that had no camping signs on it. Gallen claims to have struggled with voices and demons after trying strong LSD when he was 21, but no actual motive for the murders has ever been uncovered. In 2019, Gallen pleaded no contest for the murders of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen, and his brother Seamus. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in prison. The arrest and conviction of Sean Gallen came as a relief to Lindsay's and Jason's families, but at the same time, they still miss them and feel that the world would be a better place with them in it. But as devoted Christians, they have no doubt that they will see Lindsay and Jason again and that gives them peace. Lindsay's mom, Kathy, sat down with me to discuss this tragic case. That conversation is coming up in just a moment. Hey everyone, with a brand new year, a lot of us are hoping to make this year an even better one than last. But for some of us, that's easier said than done, because often, things that were weighing on us don't magically leave us with the change of a calendar page. But the good news is, there is help, and that help is called BetterHelp. If there's something that's interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals, then BetterHelp online counseling might just be the right solution for you. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can connect in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient, and you can start communicating with a counselor in under 24 hours. This isn't self-help. It's professional counseling. Send a message to your counselor at any time. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp can assist you with so many things, from depression, stress, and anxiety, to family conflicts, sleep issues, and more. Anything you share is confidential. And while BetterHelp isn't a crisis line, it is convenient, professional, and affordable. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener of the Murder in My Family, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting BetterHelp.com/family. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Once again, go to BetterHelp, that's HELP.com/family, and you'll save 10% on your first month of BetterHelp. Hi, Kathy, and welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on to discuss your daughter Lindsay's case with us.
Well, thank you. It's always an honor to talk about Lindsay. And when things like this happen and we get to talk about her, we call it Lindsay fruit because we see she was such an incredible young lady. And even though her death was horrific, we try to look for the good and see where we can help others through it.
Yeah, from everything I've read and researched, that Lindsay was an amazing and very kind person. So I know you were probably very proud of her.
Oh, so proud of her. Just so proud of her. She's just beautiful inside and out. Just a few weeks away from her 23rd birthday and her wedding. Just at the very beginning of life, really, for her.
Yeah. And if you would, can you tell us a little bit about Lindsay and what kind of person she was, or maybe some of your favorite memories of her?
Okay. Lindsay was just one of those people that kind of stayed behind the scenes mostly. She really didn't know what she wanted to do in life. She did know, though, she wanted to serve the Lord. And she was good at whitewater rafting. The summer before she was killed, she worked in West Virginia for a company and blew out her knee. So we look at this as kind of a blessing because she came home in December to get knee surgery, and then she stayed with us until she left in June for California. And during that time, Lindsay blossomed. She began to know who she was. She began to just be on fire for the Lord. Her and I did a Bible study together, and I did not know, no one knew that she was journaling. And in fact, yesterday, my husband was preaching on parenting, and he used a couple quotes from Lindsay's journal. At 22, it's almost like she knew. One of the things she said in her journal, she said, one thing I've learned at 22 is life is short, very short. Only what's done for Christ will last. And then she rebuked us all and said, get busy. Get out there. Don't waste time. Time is precious. And when she did go to camp in California to work with the young people at Rock and Water, story after story after story of young people that came and said, Lindsay would spend the whole night with us and not sleep, just talk with us and be with us and help us, and then have to be up at 6 for another hike or whatever. But Lindsay just cared about people. And I think that's what's so special about her. We need more people like that.
Yeah, the world definitely is short on people like that. And it sounds like she really came into her own and and took on some initiative and felt like she knew what path she was taking.
She did. I think she was going to be in some kind of ministry, whether it be youth ministry or camp ministry, or I know her fiance, Jason's best friend, and his wife were the same kind of people, and right now they're serving in Russia. So I could see them doing the same thing, helping people. I remember when she was packing to go to California, and I said, "Oh, Lindsay, be careful. There's so many things out there." And I was thinking of the camp. You're going to be climbing. You're going to be in the river. Just take very good care of yourself, because if something happens, I don't know what I do. And very calmly, she said, "Well, Mom, if something happens, then it was my time, and you know where I'll be, and I'll see you later. But I got to go help these people."
So your concern, it sounded like, was maybe some of the physical things that could happen to her, not the people that might be out there.
No, we had no idea there was such evil out there. When they did find their bodies and were trying to come up with suspects, because they knew nobody where they were. They were 3 hours from the camp. And all these people came up on the list, and it was like, wow, that many people could have done this? What is the world coming to? They didn't even know them.
Scary that there's that amount of people out there, let alone, one person. And I definitely want to get more into that. But you mentioned Jason. Can you tell us a little bit about how Lindsay and Jason met and found each other, and what were your thoughts of Jason?
Yes. Jason was a wonderful human being. He was very unique too. He once told his parents he'd never marry, or thought he would marry, and then he found Lindsay, which she was cute. She was unique. He went to school in West Virginia, where Lindsay did, and he also worked the river. In fact, he was the superior guide, but he wouldn't know. He wouldn't tell you that. You'd have to figure that out. And he was renting a room for my other daughter and son-in-law, so he could work the river down there during Lindsay's sophomore year of college. And they just kind of started dating, and right away he asked to marry her. And my husband said, "We have nothing against you, but we just need time." And I think she needed some time too. And then when she came home that December with the blown out knee, he followed. And he stayed with one of his buddies up here, which was also a buddy of Lindsay's. And he was not a freeloader. He got a roofing job in Ohio in January, and I think he worked hard. And a couple months later, he's asked for her hand, and we saw that they were meant to be together. And we said, of course. He was a sweetheart too. He was a server. He just fell head over heels with Lindsay. And one summer, he lived in a bus and she lived in a tent so they could do ministry. They were made for each other, quite unique, but made for each other. Very special. I loved Jason, and I just feel like I lost out on having that son. I was just getting to have a relationship with him, and I lost that too.
It sounds like they were really soulmates. They were meant to be together.
They were.
Yeah. And you mentioned them deciding to go to California. How long had they planned going there and working on that, what they were doing?
Well, they knew they wanted to get a summer job working at a camp. And Jason had such unique skills, like I said. There probably wouldn't have been much around here as far as the Christian camp that does the extreme things that Rock and Water did. They had tried a couple others, and I think they were turned down. And several years before Jason came to know Lindsay, he worked at a camp out there, not this one. And he knew of Rock and Water and contacted them. And they had to actually go out and try out. I wasn't sure how Lindsay would do. She passed. And one day she called. She could only call once a week. And she said, Jason passed too. She said, in fact, they asked him if he would be the lead. I said, well, of course, with all those skills. And she said, he never told them. They just recognized it. And I said, that's pretty cool. And it really was a place that they were meant to be. Jason fell climbing 2 weeks before they were killed, and he probably shouldn't have survived that fall, but God had plans for them to go to heaven together.
How long were they there in California before they were killed?
They were there end of May, June, July, and then they were killed August 15th. In fact, that was their last week in California, and Lindsay was going to come back first to try to help with the wedding plans, and Jason was going to stay because they had her car out there and help clean up camp and then come back. And they had decided at the last minute, and I remember Lindsay saying something to me that they wanted to see San Francisco. I remember saying, oh, that's a dangerous city. And she just kind of shook her head, but they didn't tell anybody. It was just one of those last minute things. And when they were in San Francisco, we think that Jason's parents said that in one of his childhood vacations, they were out there along Coast 101 in Jenner. They think that Jason said, well, let's go back the scenic route through Jenner. And that's probably how they ended up on the beach there.
Wow. And you mentioned it seems like a spur of the moment, almost by chance that they happened to go there, just the wrong spot at the wrong time. Had they been staying in touch with you the entire time? And
yes.
So they hadn't had any problems with anyone or any issues along the way?
No, they didn't have cell phones. If they would have, we would have found their bodies sooner. But the camp was so exhausting, and they weren't allowed to have cell phones at the camp, the kids or anything. They just wanted them to be in the wilderness. But Lindsay and Jason didn't own any anyway. But once a week on Sunday, Lindsay would come out of the camp with Jason, and she had a stool, and she'd get on a payphone at a bar and call us. In that last Sunday, we didn't get a call. We got a little worried because I had her plane tickets and I was to give her all that information. But she was just so excited at what she was able to do there and what God was doing. And she was just top of the world. So it was good to hear from them about 3:00 every Sunday. We would expect a call, and it was wonderful. I know they were exhausted, but then I said to Chris, and really concerned when we didn't get that phone call. He said, well, it's her last Sunday. Maybe they went someplace with their other kids or the group or the staff or something. So, but that's not what the case was.
And how did you get the news that they had been killed?
That Monday morning, Chris and I were getting ready to go buy some bridesmaid shoes. And the phone rang, and it said Rock and Water, which is quite unusual because they never called from Rock and Water. But it was one of the camp employees, one of the head guys in the office, and he said, do you know where Lindsay and Jason are? And my heart sank. And I said, they're there with you. They're excited. He says, no, don't worry. Maybe they just ran off to get married. And I said, no. They wouldn't have done that. So that was the word. And we waited all day. I got a hold of Jason's parents in Michigan. By Tuesday, there was still nothing. In fact, I called the sheriff's department and everything out there. Nothing they could do. They were adults. We got on a plane and went out to California Tuesday at that time.
I was going to say, as a parent so far away in another state, you must have felt pretty helpless to be like you couldn't help, like you couldn't reach them. And that's why I take it that you decided to jump on that plane.
We did. And we just needed to be out there. We just needed to be as close to them as we could. We had no idea, too, that they were in the San Francisco area. We thought they were probably around the camp. They'd been hiking. They fell, something like that. That's kind of But then the worst scenario does come into your mind. What if somebody hurt them? Oh, no, they wouldn't hurt them. They're harmless as flies. But we went out, and the next day, Jason's parents came. One thing Chris and I were able to do when we got out there, it was the middle of the night by the time we got out there, and we drove to El Dorado Sheriff's Department, that was the district, and pounded on the door. And again, they say, you have to wait so many days. They're adults. Nothing we can do. We went back out into the parking lot, and our rented car sitting there, like, we have no idea where we're at. And this truck pulls up, and it's Craig Lomax, and he's the one that ran the camp at the time. And he said, "Follow me." And he took us to his house, and we stayed there. He was staying at the camp at the time, and the whole camp and the kids at their age just embraced us. I mean, it was amazing to have that kind of contact right away when you're totally lost. It seemed like in another land. And then that morning, we started calling newspapers, TV programs, radios, programs, anything we could think of to get the word out that they were missing. And that's how that all got started.
And eventually I take it that the police did somehow track you down and locate you. How did that come about?
Okay, well, we waited several days, and at the camp, the kids at the camp made flyers. And one day I got to thinking, I think it was a Thursday by then. This all started on Monday. I said, I think Lindsay had a bank account back home. I'm not sure. I'm sure she didn't have much in it, but it was a God thing. So I called the bank, and I talked to a friend actually that was her age, and I said to him, Lindsay, he knew, they all knew Lindsay was missing, and they were all frantic. And I said, if this gets you in trouble, please don't do it. But could you just check and see if Lindsay wrote a check or, anything? And he says, I'm going to look right away. And he did. And he was gone a few minutes and came back, and he said, oh my. I said, what? And he said, Saturday down at Fisherman's Pier in San Francisco, Lindsay bought a bottle of Tabasco sauce with her bank card. I said, really? That was good news to hear. Went back, told all their friends. They're just standing around crying and praying. And right away, they grabbed a bunch of the posters along with Craig and his wife, the director, and took off for San Francisco. They were going to put up posters. Now, as big as that city is, and, but it was something. So we and the Allens went back to the Lomax house. Couldn't sleep. We really didn't sleep much at all that week. And I was up about 5:30 in the morning, sitting in the living room by myself, and I saw a car coming up Craig's driveway. And I saw it was Craig and his wife and another young man that had gone, and I didn't recognize the other man, but it turned out to be a pastor. And they came to the door, and they said, on our way there, we found out that a red car was found at Jenner. We had no idea where Jenner was. And 2 bodies. And they need to see you down at the sheriff's department. And they just wanted a description of Jason and Lindsay. And it was verified it was them. And at that time, we were just a mess. And they said that you don't have to go to Sonoma County. That's the county that it was in, that they're coming to you. And these 3 wonderful detectives showed up that evening. They had lie detector tests and all this because they wanted to go through all the camp members and make sure. And that was the start of a beautiful relationship. In fact, we're still in contact with a lot of them, and some of them are family. We spend holidays with them. It was wonderful.
It's sort of, mixed emotions, I guess. Something so awful could bring you together and start new relationships out of something so dark.
Yes. I mean, it's God can take the darkest situation and turn it into light. Doesn't mean that we still aren't ripped apart for losing them, but what Satan or man means for evil, God can turn around to good.
I can't even imagine the helpless feeling of being in another state, having to go through this ordeal and getting that news.
Yes, it was awful.
What did the police tell you early on? Did they have any leads or clues? Did they give you any information and say, we're going to solve this or anything like that?
They promised us from the beginning that they would get this person, that this came very personal to them when they learned of Lindsay and Jason's history and they met us. It was like, we will get this person. And they did have several leads. Way back at the beginning, they thought it was maybe a guy that was just wandering through. In fact, they even had him on the news, but it wasn't him. But they've had several people on their list. We went out yearly to talk and to see where they were. And then after this was over, they told us what we knew. Most of them knew it was Sean Gallen from the beginning. We just didn't have enough evidence. That's what we needed. And of course, the gun was gone. There wasn't any. It was 5 days on the beach. By then, the gun was probably already gone. He wasn't dumb. The only way they were going to get him, and I think toward the end, they might have been getting a little sad because they knew the only way they were going to get him was a full confession. And that's not the type of person this was. And he gave it to him.
And this is a really troubled and dangerous person. He had gotten in trouble for a bomb. He had killed his own brother later on. I take it, not early on, but but eventually he killed his own brother. When you found out that he was arrested and he was the one that did this, and police had him on their radar, as you mentioned, early on, but they didn't really share that information publicly. But did you know a lot about him? Did you know anything about him? Or did the police just say, here's the person that did this and here's what we know?
I knew. They told us everything they knew about him that they could, without hurting the case. Of course, we had other people on the list too, so we're not totally sure who it is. But we'd found some very disturbing things about him. And it was because he killed his brother that he got caught and confessed to our murders. And it was because our detectives were so determined that they did it. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have happened without these guys.
Yeah. And how tough was it to wait and know that there's people they're looking at, but they haven't arrested them yet?
The fact that they said they would get him, we really believed that they would. They're the 15th year though, we're like, gee, maybe we just have to live with the fact that we'll never catch this person. But then it all burst open. Lots of prayer, lots of work. He did himself in. See, most murderers talk or they say something to somebody, and this guy must have been, he's a loner, must have been pretty quiet, but he blew up and killed his brother, and that was his downfall. Eventually, I think something else would have happened. He'd have killed somebody else. But he is the one that decided to give his full confession. No one prodded him in that jailhouse. He had he didn't have a conscience, but he did say something like, I don't care about my brother, but those kids on the beach have bothered me for a long time. And I think that's prayer. Yeah.
Did that stage, that chapter of everything. Now that you know who did this, now you've got to wait to see what the courts do and what the legal system does. Was that a whole nother ordeal for you?
It was. It was almost easier in some ways not knowing. But then we've always felt like he'll hurt somebody again. That was the problem. But yeah, it was a new phase. It was good that he was caught. I remember one of the detective's wives saying, because I always prayed for him, even sent him the Bible, said, "Do you realize this man is evil?" And I said, "Of course I realized that." I guess until I saw him in court, I didn't really realize how blank a human being can become in evil. I mean, I still can't fathom it. You know, I'm glad I can't, but there's just something not right with people like that.
And you mentioned, the possibility that this person, we know he hurt other people, and he could have gone on to hurt even more had he not been caught. He was given ultimately, 3 life sentences for the murders?
Yes, plus extra years. So he said he'll never get out. So
we know that he stays there. He's not going to hurt anyone else. Do you feel at this point that justice has been done?
I feel at this point justice on earth has been done. The true justice will come when he dies and he faces God. I hang on to that. I am not sure, the death penalty. Did we want him to have that? We wanted to follow whatever our lawyers and our detectives told us was best. And this seemed to be the best. This seemed to put him away for good.
I know that your family and yourself, you're very committed to your faith. Is that what got you through all of this? And at the end of the day, I know it's probably tough to think about, but as faith tells us that we need to do, have you forgiven this man for what he did?
This man has never asked for forgiveness. If he asked, we probably would. As far as letting him tear me up inside day by day, I'm not going to let him have that kind of control. Like I say, he's in God's hands, and he can do a better job now with him than I could. There was a point before I saw him in court that, as I thought through this, I thought, he must have had such a horrible upbringing, but I still couldn't feel pity for him at all for what he did. But this just isn't normal. This just isn't right. I know he didn't have the loving care growing up that Jason and Lindsay did, but still, there's no pity that he has to spend the rest of his life in prison.
It must be hard balancing wanting to consider how he got to this point with your own personal loss and grief that you've gone through.
I kind of am thankful that I had the 15 years before I faced him. I was on a steadier ground. I was stronger. I didn't like that he was out there, but I felt like I was ready to do this part now.
Well, I know it was a long journey for you to get answers and to find some kind of peace, and knowing that this person won't harm anyone ever again. Hopefully that does give you comfort, even though it won't bring Lindsay back to you. But I think we talked about it earlier. It sounds like Lindsay and Jason were both two really fantastic people, and the world is worse off without them. And I appreciate you coming on to share their story with us.
Well, I told him that at the sentencing when we had a chance to say a few things to him. I said, I can't imagine, he's the same age as Jason. I said, I can't imagine that the world is better off that you're left here and they're gone. Can you? And he just looked down. I don't think he probably got it, but I got to say my piece. That these people were special. He said, I thought they were homeless. I said, what does that matter? What does that matter? You took out two of God's finest, and you're going to have to answer to that.
Yeah. And hopefully, as a person of faith, you know that there's justice that he has to eventually face. And that's hope. Again, on earth, we can only go so far as what the legal system will allow here. But, hopefully there's something else out there that he has to account for. And again, I can't thank you for coming on enough to talk about this case. This is one that's long interested me, and I was so glad to hear that there was an arrest and that your families got the answers that you had waited for so long. Yes,
we did. And we're so thankful for that. And my heart goes out to other family members that have family that's murdered. And I know not everybody is as fortunate as we are as finding that person, but that's okay if it takes years. It still could come. It still could come. Talk, or they will do something stupid and they will get caught.
Yeah, sometimes the wheels of justice turn slowly, but the important thing is that they do turn.
Yes, they do. They do. It'll all be okay.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to thank Sonny Landon for writing and research assistance in this episode. As we wrap up, I'd like to invite you to listen to this preview of a podcast called Malice. It's brand new on my network, AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to give it a listen. I'll see you back here soon for an all-new episode of The Murder of My Family. But before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.
Predators. Their acts are evil. We call them monsters. We say no human could perpetrate the crimes they have committed. But in truth, only human beings execute these horrific acts. And if you're like me, you want to know why. To find out, join me, Ariel Cooksey, on my podcast Malice. As a social psychologist, I dig into the psychology, sociology, neurobiology, child development, trauma, and other factors that come together to create malicious offenders. Find Malice wherever you listen to podcasts.